everybody for coming out tonight. We appreciate it. This is our first public budget meeting for the work council that's been ongoing. We've moved it ahead a little bit this year. We started our budget work a bit earlier this year, and certainly we're much further ahead than normally at this time of the year, and really appreciate the work, obviously, that our staff has done, and council. And so tonight we really want to take the opportunity to go through the budget preparation that council has been working on, and give you some information in terms of the direction that council has taken and are taking with respect to our overall budget. So first I want to start, before I even speak to this, last year when this council was newly elected and it was our first go through, we really put some long-term strategies in place, and I just kind of want to highlight one of them because it really is the overarching number one strategic objective that we set as a result of the long-term fiscal goal and objective for council. And we'll talk about it through the budget discussion tonight, but it gets into the piece of agreement allocation and how over the years that the city and our budget has been heavily reliant on that piece of agreement money for our operating budget and trying to get it reallocated into capital. And so the number one strategic priority that council has set for that is for in 7 years, we want to have 85% of that piece of agreement money allocated towards capital and 15 to operating. And so last year was the first year in that road, and this year we're further along, and we'll talk about how we made some of the movements towards that target, that objective. So this year it's not going to be just a flat increase overall on the various mill rates. So there's a 4.5% increase planned for residential, 2% increase on the mill rate to commercial property, 10% on major industry, and 6.3% on light industry. So the residential rating, again, we'll hit later on through the budget, but it really was as a result of a decrease in the overall value of the assessment roll that we received for residential property in the city, is why that's up 4.5%. Commercial was up a little higher than normal, so it was held at a 2%. Major industry, we really went behind on the major industry rates over the years in terms of we dropped it back into 2007, 8, 9. Dropped that major industry rate from about $38 a thousand to down to about 16 or 18. Last year we moved it up to get it more competitive, get the burden of the share of burden of tax revenue coming into the city a little bit more onto major industry. We only have 4 major industries. This year have announced they're going to curtail operations. We don't know what the future is going to look like for them. Direction of council last year to raise that even more, but we brought it back down a little bit this year to kind of soften that a little bit. The allocation of capital from the piece of our agreement this year is at 45%, which is up somewhat, and we had a little bit of an increase there. Our utility rates, we're going to keep at 2.4%, which is really a CPI increase on those. And the other principle in here is that we're not entering into any further long-term borrowing for 2020 as it relates to our capital budget and or long-term borrowing. And we'll show you some of the graphs in terms of what our long-term borrowing is doing, both in terms of our principal and interest payments and repayments. I'm happy to go through this, and obviously all the council are here tonight, and we appreciate everybody and our staff. And I thought we'd go through it through the presentation. I'm happy to do it in one of 2 ways. We can take questions from you as we go through it now, or at the end if you have questions at the end of it. And honestly, if you have the urge to ask a question, jump up. We've got a small enough crowd tonight that we're happy to handle that whatever way works for you.
So where does the money come from? And this is, I think sometimes it was certainly a surprise for some people to know that out of the $65 million budget that we operate in, only 18 million of it comes from property taxes for the residents and business community. 15 million, 15.4 comes from our Peace River Agreement. We received a lift this year. This is the first year of that new Peace River Agreement we renegotiated 2 years ago. They put a ceiling on it of 50 million starting in 2020, but they also lifted it by 2% and will lift by 2% for the next, I think, 25 years. We renegotiated. And so we saw that lift occur this year. So it went, our allocation last year was 15.2 million. And this year we got 15.45 million. 13.5 million comes from fees and charges. 9 million for collection from other governments. We really want to stress this when people always get their tax bill and you see their tax bill of $3,500 we're paying to the city, but usually about out of that 3,500, if a major portion of that goes school taxes and Peace River Regional District taxes, so it isn't all city taxes. We collect that tax for the PRRD and for the school and for the regional hospital district, and then we allocate it out to them. But it's just worth noting that $9.1 million of that tax bill that we collect goes out to those other levels of government. Gaming franchises, miscellaneous grants, so we get some traffic fine revenue, we get some revenue from the province for gaming from the Chances Casino and things like that. So we get almost $6 million from the province from those other sources. And we have $2.5 million that's in our reserve account for carry forward to other projects. So out of the $65 million budget, 18 million comes from just tax, property taxes, and the rest comes from other sources. So this talks a little bit about that total assessment and as it relates to our property taxation and assessment. Property assessment is what drives that first piece of the puzzle for us in terms of us assigning a rate, a mill rate to that assessment to get to the allocation. So residential assessment this year went down by $28 million, so about 2.5% decrease. And there is the explanation for us of the 4.5% increase. We really have taken this approach that over the last 10 or 15 years or 20 years, the tax mill rate hasn't been increasing to commensurate to keep up with some of the inflationary pressures on the budget. This council has said we absolutely need to do that in order to ensure that we maintain that delta of inflationary pressures and not getting ourselves into a position where you can't continue to provide the services that we are today in the future. And so our residential, you see the residential property assessed value went down by about 30 million, 29 million. Utilities was up a bit. It doesn't make up a major portion of our tax bill. Major industry went down a little bit. And again, that's where we're trying to put that a little bit, get a little more of the burden of taxation to industry and major and light industry and off of residential and commercial. Light industry stayed pretty flat, but we didn't notice, I guess, this last year, but our light industry rate wasn't increased last year like it was with commercial and heavy industry. It was actually, light industry was even less than commercial, so that's why we've taken a bit of a increase to it and moved it up a little bit more, put some additional onus on light and heavy industry to move it away from commercial. Commercial this year went up quite a bit. You see the drop in residential by 28 or 29 million, and commercial went up by about the same. And so we've held that tax rate, that mill rate, down to 2% because they did see an increase in the overall assessment, and that will generate some additional increase on the check they write. And then recreational and farm is small values in terms of overall assessment and the changes to it. Didn't make that much, but that's the big aspect for us in terms of how we set that foundation. And so there we got to the mill rates and how we set those mill rate increases. So the residential rate is going to increase by 4.5%. It's going to go from 560,000 to 587,000. That offsets the decrease in assessment, but also keeps us with that 2.5% of that 2.5% increase that we're trying to maintain to continue to build revenue. And then the others, the utility is going up the 3.6%. Major industry is a 10% increase. It's going from 27 to 29. We've done some analysis on that. We've looked at other communities in the north and around to make sure that we're in the averages of that mill rate for other communities. And I think the average is probably rolling at about $32 a thousand. We're still a little bit under that overall value, but we also are cognizant of the fact that LP is a major piece of that, a major employer in our community. We really want to make sure that we recognize that. It's a tough market. You hear about how difficult the forestry sector is, and lots of communities, mills closing, and jobs being lost. And so we've been engaged with LP. We've been meeting with them and talking to them about this, and absolutely want to make sure we keep in step with them as it relates to their operations, and making sure that we keep in step with them in terms of this rate increase that we're imposing on heavy industry. And then light industry, you'll see that last year our rate was $16.8 per thousand, and this year it's going to 17.8. We brought it up to bring it up consistent with the commercial rate, because we were even seeing light industry on it less than commercial, which didn't make sense. They should be the same as commercial, or even maybe somewhat higher. So they're seeing about a 6% increase this year. And then we held commercial at 2% just because they saw a fairly significant increase in their overall value of the commercial assessment. And so they'll see an increase in that as well. And then farm and direct properties. So that explains kind of for us how, once we get that assessment and a preview assessment roll on the assessment roll, and once we get into the budget of operating and capital, how we set those rates based on that information. Now, as I said earlier, we're happy to take questions. So if you want to pause here, if anybody has a question about any of this now that you'd like to ask, I'm happy to do that, or I should keep going and we can ask questions at the end. And even honestly, with a small crowd, we're happy to, at the end of it, we'll all hang around. And if you have questions that you want to ask us individually without here, we're happy to do that as well. So this gets into our municipal property taxes, and really there's two aspects that we talk about: market change and non-market change. And I just want to explain that really quickly. Non-market change, if somebody builds a new home, or somebody builds a new shop, or somebody does some renovations to their property, that's non-market change. What it basically means is it's assessment that didn't exist last year that now is on the assessment roll, and we start to see the revenue for that construction or that building. And we didn't have that money last year. So if you built a new house this year, it was assessed, or last year, and it finally got completed. It's July, August, September. DC assessment would assess the property. It would hit our property assessment roll in October or November. And then that taxation would come to us this year as a result of that new assessment. So it's non-market change. It doesn't have anything to do with the assessment of existing property. It has all to do with new construction. And so that's the non-market change, is exactly that. And so sometimes where we see properties where you see a large increase in revenue by a particular sector and segment, we've broken that out so you can explain that was all new assessment that come into the city this year that didn't exist last year. So that's the breakdown. So the properties of residential was 6.9 million in property taxation from 2019 came to the city. This year we're going to have another $33,000, $34,000 come from new assessment, new non-market change, and we're going to have $200,000 in a loss of revenue from that drop in the assessed value of residential property in the city. And so the increase that we're going to have of 4.5% is going to bring in an additional $300,000. to make a net force of $7 million in residential property assessment that's gonna come into the city for our budget this year, which overall is a 4.5% increase, but you can see what the drop in the assessed value does means we lose that $200,000. So that's kind of, that slide is what that's explaining. So utilities of $73,000, we're gonna get another $7,500 from just market taxes of the market changes, and then we're gonna go from 73 to 83,000. So that basically, those four areas explain what's gonna happen. Major industry is gonna pay 725,000 last year. With the market change and the non-market change, they're gonna pay 754,000. So when you think about LP as an example, or Air Liquide, or Ferris, or AltaGas, basically they're gonna pay about $30,000 more in taxes this year than they did last year, purely as a result of almost all on the assessment and that tax increase. So it's not a huge number when you say a 10% increase when it rolls out to 30,000 for them as it relates to just that tax increase. Commercial property, we collected 8.1 million last year. We're going to collect 8.7 this year. And so at 16.1 million last year in property taxation we collected, this year we're collecting 17 million. And that's all as a result of non-market change and market change and the increase in that assessment and the increase in the rates of 2.5% to 3% that we're trying to accomplish to continue to keep that inflationary pressures into our budget where we're increasing costs of delivery of services, insurance, fuel, labor, everything that increases a homeowner or a business, we all face that exactly the same thing in the operation of the city. And we need to ensure that we keep that inflationary pressure. I think that's one of the signals that we really want to demonstrate that we are being prudent about that and building it for the future. Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have one question then. So you're talking about there's a value of the exhibition grounds and the changes in lorry rate come into the same budget or fall under the same wherever you're talking about?
So anything to do with our operating costs of operating those facilities are built into our operating budget. The taxation for the exhibition grounds is owned by the city. The Rotary Lake is a facility owned by the city, so that's not a revenue stream, it's just purely operating. So the average, I want to spend a little bit of time on this one. This is the average municipal property taxes per roll. And so when people say you're going to have a 4.5% tax increase, that's the one that gets the headline and is the one that raises the attention of folks. But this goes through a 4.5% tax increase for residential. So out of 40, we have 4,765 rolls, properties, residential properties in the city of Dawson Creek. Of those 4,765, the top line, 1,921 properties will pay $193,000 less this year than they did last year, or an average of $101 less in taxation this year than they did last year because of the decrease in the assessed value of those properties. 1,721 properties will pay $66,000 more in taxation this year, or an average of $38. 937 properties will pay an average of $156,000 or $167 more. And the last line I want to stress here is an increase of over $1,000. There's 28 properties that are going to pay $42,000 in taxation, and that's almost entirely non-market change. That's almost entirely new construction of new residences or new buildings that qualify under residential properties that are now hitting our tax roll, so it's all new money, if you can use that term, into the taxation for the city. And on the other line, commercial, which is a 2% increase, so there's 943 properties that are residential or commercial properties. 101 of them are going to see an average of $178,000 in less taxes we're going to collect from them. an average of $1,767, their taxes will decrease because their property values and assessment decrease. And you can see through 392 will face a 12,000 more in revenue, or $31. 93 of them will pay an average of $181. 199 will pay $694,000 or $3,400 more in increase in taxes. And that's, again, that market change, non-market change, which properties that didn't exist before. So that assessment really makes a huge difference in terms of what an individual will actually write their check for. Go ahead, Wayne.
Quick question. When you're talking about light commercial, so residential properties that are in fact rental properties, straight rental properties, are they classed as just normal residential taxes, or are they classed as a light commercial property and maybe taxed somewhat more?
They're residential properties by BC assessment and the use of the properties, and they are assessed at a residential property.
So you can be in business without having to pay a business license. So that's a pretty good deal. Thank you.
So the next slide is our our Peace River agreement and the historical allocation. And so this is the piece that I really I talked about right at the beginning, is this whole component around our Peace River agreement. We honestly, having that flow of revenue into our community on an annual basis and into the region, $50 million. Fort St. John, I think it's about 22 million. We get about 15.5 million, and the rest is divided up among the other municipalities and the regional district. And honestly, you can see what it means to our community and our budget when 18 million is coming in a property assessment, and we get another 15.5 million from the province in terms of this agreement. And so you can see the trend line over the years of what's happened to that agreement. And we use it in two ways in how we explain and what we use it for, and how we allocate it. To capital, for doing our capital project, building buildings, fixing and paving roads and building sidewalks, capital. And then to our debt servicing, and then to operating. And as I started out with, the number one priority that this council has set over the next 7 years is to move get 85% of that money into our capital and debt servicing, and 15% into operating. And so you'll see in 2019, at $15.2 million, we were at about a total of about 42%. This year, we moved that up. 45% is going to capital now, and 14% is going to debt servicing, and 41% to operating. The objective is to get that, remove the dependency of Peace River Agreement money out of our operating budget, because it is a memorandum of understanding. It is an agreement with the province. And this council has made it clear that the prudent way for us to operate is to have that money in capital, because if we ever lost it, for us to try to find $4 or $5 or $6 or $7 million would be a major bit of work, both in terms of cutting services or increasing revenue to try to offset that. Gordon, go ahead.
Just a quick question. What would have to happen for you to lose the PRA money?
Yeah, so honestly, we just renegotiated. It was, so the last term was absolutely the priority for us to get that Peace River Agreement renegotiated with the province. We started in about 16, 17. They agreed to the extension of it and the new Peace River Agreement. So I honestly am in no way suggesting that it would or could end. They've just renegotiated. There's an out in 7 years where if it's not meeting our needs, we get to bring it back to the government to renegotiate. And in 6 or 7 years after that, I think they could, if it's not working for them and they're not seeing the development in the region, they could talk about bringing it back down the ceiling, but it never goes below 50 million. honestly, we don't believe there's anything in the horizon that this government or other governments are suggesting it's gonna end, but we absolutely believe that it's prudent for us as a municipality, as the local government, to get that money out of operating at the capital.
For sure, because the idea was that was for capital
Yeah.
projects originally. So there's no, it could disappear tomorrow.
No.
Yeah, I
That's
didn't
not,
think so. There's a lot of people that were talking about that, and it seemed that that was sort of the push in the previous budget meetings, that this could disappear or evaporate. So I just wanted it to be clear that that's not going on.
yeah, no, and so it was a real priority and a real push by our council to get that renegotiated. Because it was due to expire in 2020, that 2005 agreement was due to expire in 2020, and it was critical for us to get that renegotiated, and it was, and we're ecstatic, honestly, with having an agreement in place with the 25 years future that it has for us. The priority that council has said, and I'm just gonna keep reiterating that, is get that money into capital out of operating, and 40% of it's going to operating today, and it's our goal in 7 years to have it down to 15%. Yes, ma'am.
Totally makes sense to, we'd rather not have this as something we're relying on. And I might be jumping the gun here, is there plans for how we're going to fill in that space and, put that money back in instead of rather than eroding the services and stuff that we've been paying for it with?
Sure, so this year the priorities were, and so, I will talk about that. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say, you might not be.
transit was a priority.
Yeah.
And that we will talk about. The fire department was a priority, that was talked about. We've looked at other revenue sources through the Peace River Regional District. We're, as a city, are providing services for all the arts, culture, recreation services for our community, but also it's used by rural and Kuskoopie, and we see as an opportunity there to have some discussions with our Peace River Regional District and Kuskoopie to talk about revenue sharing there. There's a number of strategies, and we've moved 1.3 million last year, and we continue to move that, and it didn't happen overnight, and our goal is to have it change overnight, but we've got some strategies in place to do that. But it's not going to be done without, we've seen the difficulty in getting it. It's a big job, and we absolutely, council are, it's a ton of work in order to balance. People won't come to city council to cut services.
No.
Right?
No, that's why I just wanted to know if
Yeah.
there are plans in place, I absolutely agree with, being financially responsible, we don't wanna count on something that might not always be there, but just to make sure that, there's also discussion about how we're gonna, fill in that money that it shouldn't be.
There's some more slides coming as well, and we'll show you some of that as well. And but that's what's driving the work that we do. So fees and charges, when we talk about that at 11 million or $11.5 million, $13.5 million, water and sewer are obviously a big piece of that, and we built that is part of our budget, but it's about $10 million of the 13. And then you can see the other areas that we recreation, so our pools, our arenas, those areas, environmental waste services, so recycling and the waste garbage collection. We have about $350,000 from the airport in revenue that we collect for landing fees and rentals and things like that. $267,000 from the police, $200,000 from business licenses, $122,000 in building inspection, and $78,000 in transit, $62,000 in fire department, $35,000 in cemetery fees. And so these are all things that we've looked at and addressing in terms of fees and charges, because you look at that as another revenue stream to offset the balance of who's paying for the services and how they should be paying for them. But this just illustrates how significant the issue is when you talk about the cost of services, and only if you exclude water and service, you're only collecting about 2 or 3 million from other sources in all those other areas. And where does it go? So protective services, police, fire, building inspection, bylaw enforcement is 9.2. Recreation and culture services, the arenas, the pools, the library, all of those things, 8.6 million. Transportation, and so that's all of our transportation, the airport, the transit, the public works for all of the road maintenance and things like that. General administration, debt services at 3.7 million, and I got a slide about that we'll show you, and that'll answer maybe some of your, how that being impacted as well in debt servicing. Water services, environmental services, sewer services, and cemetery services for $40 million. And then 11 million, 12 million in capital. We got a 2.5 million in carryover from the projects we never got done. Some of the projects last year, 112 and some other things. And that's where all the money goes in terms of where we collect it and the fees and charges and Peace River Agreement. Protective services, this just breaks that 4 or 5 areas down. Police and fire department obviously are the majority of those, that 9.2 million. Bylaw enforcement, safety and animal control. We have a contract with the BC SPCA and the SPCA to look after our animal responsibility bylaw, and we give them the $180,000 a year, I think, for that contract. And then they administer the animal control, the animal responsibility bylaw, do all of that for us. And that's at $190,000 and then $158,000 for building inspection. Recreation services, so the event center, the Canada Event Center, 1.7, the Kenmore Aquatic Center at 1.8, and then our recreation programs at 1.3. And so that recreation programs are all of those recreation programs that are handled through the city, through the course of the year, and a lot of the stuff through the O'Brien Center. Parks and playground, the Memorial Arena is 870,000, the library is 500, Kid Arena 450, the Calvin Cook Performing Arts 226,000. We give a grant for the exhibition grounds of about 125,000 now. We entered into a lease agreement with them last year. Now they are responsible to look after the exhibition grounds and all of the utilities and all of the maintenance and things, and we give them a grant of $125,000. It was really beneficial for us and for them to be able to get into a lease agreement, for them to be able to operate it. It gives them the ability to leverage other grants and things to make it more effective for them to be able to operate it. And it was a little clunky in terms of us paying utilities and things like that. So it's there. I know the Exhibition Association is very happy to be in that, where they have a lease agreement now to be able to carry on with it. The Lakota Center, so there's the uniqueness of that building down there, the Canada Event Center. You got a roof with 3 separate facilities operated, the multiplex, the event center, the pool, and our Lakota Riding Arena. And it's 3 separate entities within one roof, but all this, the pool is operated by us and our staff, and the event center is operated by Global, and they're managed under a contract with us. And then the Lakota Center is operated under an agreement with the Riding Arena Stables Association, the society, and they operate it, and they manage it, and look after it, and look at it. So that's the Lakota Center of 118,000. Community grants, fees for services of things we provide, and the multiplex and the climbing wall for miscellaneous. So it's 8.6 million. And so there's we talked about this whole aspect of the services we provide. These are all being provided by the residents and business community of Dawson Creek. And about 30 to 40% of the users of our facilities, the pools, the arenas, the library, this facility, on and on, are utilized by the entire region, both Poochkoopie and our rural areas and the county of Saddle Hills, our friends from Patron and Bonanza. And so we've addressed that, and we're in discussions with them to talk about that. We have a sub-regional bylaw right now that we shared some revenue. We get about $600,000 a year from the regional district for this sub-regional stuff, but we contribute, our residents, because we're part of that, contribute 300, so it's a net of 300. We just don't see, we need to bring some equity into that, because we just can't continue to afford to be able to provide all of that services by our residents and business community. So we are in discussions with them about it. General administration, so our administration staff and all of the folks who are in City Hall dealing with all of the business of the organization, running a business of $60 or $70 million. It takes people, and so our administration is 1.5 million. Finance, and you always want to be nice to finance, is 1 million. So always be nice to the accountant. IT is at $900,000. Other general services of 700, legislative is 360, and then 1,000 for elections. So 4.6 million in terms of the administration and the running of the organization and running the business of the city. They're all necessary and valued in terms of the services we provide. You can't do it without the administrative support. Water utilities, there's another one. Last year we've really taken an approach because we need to make sure that we build that utility reserve. There's 2 or 3 key core areas that you build for the city, and that water, sewer is a critical component of first for a city. And we have amazing water. We have both amazing supply and distribution. We now, with the building of the new reservoir that was just put in operation last year, has added 1 million cubes of storage into our system. So right now, based on the average consumption in the city of Dawson Creek per day by our residents and commercial operators, daily demand, we probably have in excess of 9 months worth of storage capacity, of supply capacity. So if the Kiscataway River ran dry, we have 9 months worth of supply available to Dawson Creek, our rural areas in Kuskokwim. And that's just the diligence and the work that I think our city and I've put towards ensuring that you have a responsible and adequate supply of water for the long term. We have growth now to sufficient capacity to grow the community to double or triple the capacity and have that supply. And we have doubled the treatment capacity last year at the treatment plant. Added another 50% onto it. And so that water system today, we and you as residents of our community should feel very, very confident and comfortable that you have a really solid supply in the long term for water, and both in terms of volume as well as quality. And we had to do some work about 2 years ago on the secondary sewer trunk bypass line, because we were needing to add capacity for the growth that was going on in the north. We had to borrow $8 million, so that's working its way through the system. But our operating in the water utility right now is we're building it, and we're building the utility to ensure we've got adequate reserves to build the capacity and maintain that system in the long term. And the sewer utility is exactly the same. So we got a capital projects of $1.5 million this year. Operating is 1.3. And then our debt servicing, where we added that $8 million into the debt for sewer, is $520,000. So we saw people felt the increase in that 2 years ago when that debt came online. It added about $20 or $25 to the debt, but it is absolutely 2 things. It's building infrastructure and adding capacity, and you need stable, solid water and sewer infrastructure. Debt servicing, and so this is 2016, our total debt servicing interest and principal was $4.3 million. We've been managing along in terms of no borrowing, building the strategy in terms of peace river agreement money. And so this year, you can see the decline over the last 4 or 5 years. That's down to $3.6 million. And so there's $700,000 that's left debt servicing out of our operating budget. So the question about what are we doing to meet that gap, that delta, how we do that? Debt servicing has helped us accomplish that. But one of the problems in council, we've had this, and we haven't had a discussion about the long term, but we absolutely need to do infrastructure work. We've got to keep those roads and sidewalks and facilities up and in shape. And so how do you manage that when you're only putting 5 or 6 or 7 million into your capital budget? So that's the discussion we're going to have ongoing in terms of meeting that long-term demand of keeping infrastructure up. If you let it go too far, then it costs you a whole bunch more money. So, Cory, go on.
Just a quick question right now. It never gets cheaper to build, ever, right? But right now, it seems to me that interest rates are pretty reasonable. So that was just one thing that I wouldn't mind having put in there. Like, I mean, if you were gonna fix something, today's not a bad day to fix it. Just because I don't anticipate interest rates actually going into the negative anytime soon. So I just wanted to throw that in there too. It's good that we're servicing the debt. That's a millstone we don't need around our neck. But if we expect Dawson Creek to be around for maybe another 5 or 7 years until this is achieved, maybe we could look a little bit more at future building.
Yeah, absolutely, that's the conversation the council have absolutely had, and we're in no borrowing this year, but that's the direction we're gonna say, where we're not gonna borrow at all. 2026, the multiplex drops off, so that drops about probably $700,000 or $900,000 out of our budget, and another $500,000 or $600,000 out of our municipal taxpayers' budget for their servicing of the Peace River Regional District debt. So 2026 is a big time, and so but at the same time, we absolutely cannot allow the infrastructure. You know, you let the pavement deteriorate a little bit, but if you let it deteriorate too much, now all of a sudden the road is gone, and you got to fix it all, and it becomes 4 or 5 times more expensive to fix that just if you just did the paving. And so that's a dilemma. That's a discussion council. I raised this because we've dropped $700,000. We haven't been borrowing, but that's today, and that's 2020. We have not locked into what we're doing for the future. But this is a very good signal to me in terms of us having have been diligent about managing that debt for the future. Capital projects, so $4.5 million in paving. Majority of that's going to 15th Street. We really need to get 15th Street identified as a priority. It's needing some significant work. We've got some facilities work, we've got some drainage work, airport, and sidewalks. So a total of $7.4 million. And we've got another $3 or $4 million in water, sewer, and then our equipment pool, for a total of $11.8 million in capital. 2.5 in carry forward, because we had a few projects that obviously didn't get finished last year. They'll be finished in 2021, 20, and so that money carries forward into the budget. And so that gets us to a total capital budget of $14.4 million. And where does the money come from? This demonstrates how important that Peace River Agreement money is to us. $7 million that was coming from the Peace River Agreement of the 14, almost half of it. We've got the 2.5 in our reserves. Water sewer has got the reserves built up in that for doing the capital project. And then we've got some grants. And we build an equipment pool, so we allocate every year money into an equipment pool. We put that money aside into a reserve. And then we are able then to do the purchases of the equipment that we need to replace through that pool. So it's a reserve account set for exactly, and every department within the city puts money into the equipment pool for the replacement of equipment. And I was just thinking about one other thing I just really want to talk about, because we did this a couple of years ago, and just there is another reserve account that we put $1.5 million that we have set aside for our flood mitigation. We've been doing some flood planning work over the last 2 years as a result of the 2011 and 16. So we've got some grant money. We've done 2018 or 19, we did the flood mapping, and last year now we're right in the middle of the second phase of that. In order for us to do any future work in regards to infrastructure or flood risk mitigation, we really need to understand what you do before you start investing money and making infrastructure or changes. So, but we have identified it, and every year we've been putting $500,000 into that flood reserve account, that flood mitigation reserve account, for us to be able to do some of that work that we know we need to do, potentially on 17th Street or 102nd, or other work within the creek and or through that floodplain. And then 8th Street now this year, beginning the construction of that and putting that bridge in there is gonna change that flow, we believe. And so there's some changes coming into the flow of the creek as well. So it's understanding all of that before we move forward with doing any work, because you can spend a bunch of money and you might just move the problems. Anyway, so with that, I'm gonna sit down, council are all here, and I'd be happy to let us all get in this and answer questions. Robin, go ahead.
And so the contractors that are gonna do the construction and stuff, are they gonna be held accountable if they don't get the work done on time?
So, for, like our construction projects or capital projects?
Yeah,
So this year we had obviously 112th Avenue, never got completed, and both the paving and the sidewalks, and still isn't completed. And so that's a huge discussion that we've had in terms of our tendering, and how we award contracts, and what the penalties are if they aren't completed by the scheduled completion date. The council are absolutely committed to working on that and ensuring that we get that resolved and have a tendering process and a contract process and a penalty process to ensure that we get the contracts and the work done as we tender them on time, and if they don't, then there should be penalties attached.
because the 3 days work schedule that was supposed to be for building up the sidewalk for the Auckland month actually became 5 weeks, which is a lot longer than 2 days.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have the two tendering process, when you guys are working on streets in town. Okay, 104th, we all remember that. You guys ripped up our sidewalks in June, and we got sidewalks after paving done in October. For probably 2 months that summer, I didn't even have access to my yard. I couldn't drive into my driveway. They put curbside, but they didn't pave it the rest of the way. So what do you guys do about that? Like, and there's one down by the college this year, they had no access all summer. How do you guys fix that?
So yeah, it's the whole process for us in construction. We put it out to tender. We ask the contractors they're bidding on the process, and we get honestly the intermediate for it. This year on 112th Avenue, the weather, there was a whole bunch of factors, and so that's part of what we absolutely are discussing in terms of that completion, the timely completion.
Well, timely completion, because I talked to the sidewalk guys, and they got a better job somewhere else, that's why they put the sides in, but didn't finish it.
It's frustrating for us as well, because we see them start them in September, and right, it's I'm happy to let council speak to it, because we absolutely feel that.
Well, I'll jump in quickly. Your point is very valid. I mean, we see it. It certainly as elected officials, the people that live in these areas talk to us, if not on a daily basis, certainly if you're downtown shopping. We are gonna go through our process to say, look, traditionally what you wanna do is go with low bid. Mostly, especially with tax dollars. There's goods and bads with that. So if you approve it and you award a contract to the low bidder, we have an end date that they have to meet. If they don't, then there's penalty clauses built in. Now, that doesn't help the person living there that still can't get in and out of their driveway. So we are talking about a new system that says, look, if we're gonna tender a project, and I can't speak for council, but part of the discussion is we wanna say, look, you have to have a start by this date, you have to have completions of X, Y, and Z by this date, and build in, I think, just a firmer contract so we don't see this again. Now, in doing that, we wanna make sure that we also don't drive at something that would be $1 million project to $1.4 million. So, but your concerns, loud and clear, and this year was a good example. I mean, without question, weather played some role with that, but I don't write it all on the weather.
I think like 104th was all weather.
You know what, so this year, I'll give you an example. So this year, last year, sorry, we actually gave approval of the capital budget a little earlier before we'd even approved the budget, so that we could get those projects out and get them tendered. And that's even for us, because this budget doesn't get formal approval until 1st of May, and so until you approve the budget, you can't move forward with the finalization of it. So it makes it, then it delays tendering and it delays awarding the contract. So sometimes they're not even awarded until July or August. So we've even moved it up last year to try to escalate that. So it's just, we completely get the frustration.
Well, I was just thinking those poor people, that somebody happened to live on 112th and was moving, they wouldn't have been able to sell their house because they couldn't have got to it. Much less try to move, right? Like, I mean, there's gotta be some sort of, you know, if that happens, and you really, I'd be pissed off at the city.
They were. But to your point, we did identify, obviously this year allowed us to make starkly clear the deficiencies in our process, and we are looking to correct that. And I think we've all had to apologize to residents or friends of residents on 112th Avenue. And yeah, no excuse, just we're aware of it, and we share your sentiments.
Sorry, can I just make a request? I know we're in a smaller room here and that there aren't a lot of people, but could everybody please be using the microphones? Make sure everybody can hear what's going on. Thank you.
If I could, I'm just gonna, Tori, you asked a couple of good questions. I mean, I think we're all, gonna try. The issue.
More.
Yeah, good. I'll give you I think, certainly I won't speak for other councils, but your point is very valid. We have a great deal of infrastructure need in our city. And as much as I would like to think, everything from fair share would be there tomorrow and we could spend 15 million, I'm not even sure that's enough. So we do have to look at incurring some debt as we go forward, in a manner no different than you or I would do at our home. It's got to be affordable. Not too many people I know buy their house and pay cash. You buy it, you take a mortgage and fit it into what you make every month and get to pay it. Our debt repayment right now, we're in very good shape. Although it seems like a large number when you're running a $40 million budget, with water, sewer included in that with our general operations. We're in good shape. So 2020, we plan for no borrowing, but that discussion is taking place as we move forward based on significant capital project requirements in our city. So that one, the fair share question you asked, could it go away tomorrow? It's not like your community charter that gives us the ability for taxation of, residential business. And I won't go terribly deep, but fair shares are access to class 2, 4, and 5, which is industrial assessments, most of which in the Peace region falls outside of municipal boundaries. The vast majority of the province fall within municipal boundaries, so they set their tax rate and collect it directly. Could it go away tomorrow? I don't expect it, but it is at the whim of cabinet, at the cabinet table, regardless of which government's in power. Now, I don't envision it going away, but there are a lot of areas in this province that go, we want a fair share agreement, what we call Peace River agreement, dating and stuff. We want one of those. And you try and explain to people, say, no, you have it. You're accessing your class 2, 4, and 5 within your boundaries. This is not a resource revenue sharing agreement. This is actually our ability to gain some revenue from class 2, 4, and 5 taxation that the province gives to us. So would I say it's guaranteed? No, it's not. Do I think a government would be foolish to step in and say we're getting rid of it? I do think that. But the reason we had a renegotiation 3 years ago now was the government of the day said, although it's not ready to open, we want to open it up and talk to you. Because they were seeing a change in the activity up here. It had slowed down some and so on. So no guarantee it's there forever. We think it's good, but the goal for us is to get it out of operation so that if, heaven forbid, something ever did happen to it, we wouldn't see 50, 80% increases in taxes or a bankrupt city, for example. Your questions were very good about that. And I just thought somebody had to talk other than the mayor.
I'm happy somebody else is.
Well, here, I have some more. I don't know everybody in the room, but I I'm familiar with most of you. My name's Corey, and I'm the president of Local 2403. We're the workers for the city of Dawson Creek. I work as a facilities maintenance worker, so when something happens in the Calvin Cook Center, I'm in here, I usually help out trying to fix it all up. With me is Stephanie Gowdy, who's my friend and our vice president, and she's lived in the community here for about 8 years. She moved up here with her family from Vancouver for opportunities in the Peace Country, and she works as clerical staff. I've been here probably 20 years, something like that. It doesn't seem like it. We are both very involved in our community, and we want to speak to you today not only as city workers and union employees, but as residents and ratepayers of the city of Dawson Creek. As we both come from other places, I mean, I'm from Saskatchewan, Stephanie's from southern BC. Our families actually chose to move to Dawson Creek. This is where we wanted to be. Not just for the employment opportunities. I could have moved to Fort St. Croix, but I didn't. I chose Dawson Creek because of the strong community services and the cultural activities, all the great stuff that we have here. We're both very proud to live and work in Dawson Creek, and we know that better services make better communities and healthier and happier residents. So we all know where we're coming from. We appreciate that the city is working to reconcile some challenging economic factors, which include a historical underfunding of capital assets. We've seen some significant costs or closures to city-owned facilities in the past few years, which could have been mitigated with regular investment in the maintenance of those properties. We had no tax increase for years and years and years. For instance, Fall Fairgrounds, Sudeten Hall, Rotary Lake, these have all been affected by lack of investment. And the lack of fiscal responsibility and long-term planning for some of our city's facilities is disappointing. And borrowing money from our future capital needs to offset operational and inflationary costs was not a sustainable plan for the long term. And that's why we appreciate that the current council is working to mitigate these past actions. And we're concerned, though, a little bit about the effect on residents today might be too much, too soon.
We were especially disappointed to hear that one of the proposed cost-saving measures for 2020 was to decrease transit service in Dawson Creek. Bus service is a key part of transportation infrastructure, and it is especially vital to our most vulnerable residents, including youth, seniors, persons with disabilities, and other marginalized folks. Subsidizing transit costs in Dawson Creek comes at a price, and we understand that services that are not self-sustaining will always be looked at in terms of efficiencies and cost-saving measures. However, the value of reliable transit in a community far exceeds monetary amounts. For those who need it, transit provides security. Employment security, medical security, food security, social security, and fundamentally the security of person, as we can see from the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada, so many of whom come from BC's north. One of the first programs to be cut at the city in 2019 was sustainability, which promoted initiatives in the community such as Idle Less Week, and look for ways for our organization to be more environmentally and socially responsible. We've seen the ripple effect of that cut throughout the city, and a reduction of transit service goes directly against the laudable goals the organization once held dear. We hope that council will reflect on the kind of community we want, one where everyone has choices and opportunities and the ability to contribute to our vibrant northern society. So what should we do instead? Rather than cutting transit services, we should be asking how we can increase transit usage by working with Northern Lights College, community groups and partners, and encouraging transit use at major employers, including the city of Dawson Creek. The benefits to our residents and economy could be exponential. Residents want to live and work in a community that is not only fiscally responsible, but provides the opportunities necessary for individuals and families to thrive.
We'd also like to discuss the administration of a major city-owned but privately operated facility, the Encana Event Center. It should come as no surprise to council that this venue is a sore spot with some city workers, as it neither creates good-paying union jobs in the actual event center section, nor does it produce the expected benefit to the community. In this budget, we see a substantial investment in this facility, and while this does have some benefit for our community, it greatly benefits the private operator whose revenues are guaranteed. We're pleased to see that $5.1 million of the parking lot upgrade will be covered by a federal grant. However, it is of great concern that a facility that opened in 2008 already needs such a substantial investment, and that the private operator is not responsible for these costs. We're not experts in the granting program, yet we wonder, could a capital project like this have not been used for a project that would have had a more substantial benefit to city taxpayers? Road and facility improvements are needed throughout our community, and after many years of withholding investments in crucial infrastructure. A major concern we have with the Encana Event Center is a lack of readily available information on the facility. In the October budget assumptions document, we see detailed breakdowns of what the city spends on key services, including information on services that are meant to be cost neutral, those that are meant to be subsidized, and those that are running a deficit. Where's the same cost breakdown for Encana? Is the event center going to be held to the same standards? If this information has been made available somewhere in the budget that I'm not seeing it, or the residents of Dawson Creek are not seeing it, if we missed it along the way, we'd ask that you direct us to it so that we can see it and how to look at it. And we can do some we can look at it ourselves. We think that that would be an important part of this budget conversation. And we're well aware that what's done is done. I'm in favor of the building myself. I like it. The Encana Event Center exists and the contract is what it is. But why are we spending even more money on this facility, and what's the return on that investment? That's the question. Just because we're conceptually spending someone else's money, in this case a federal grant, does not mean that we shouldn't be asking these questions. And we would encourage council to make this information about the Encana Event Center more accessible to the community.
It is hard for us not to see the past 2 years of budget cycles, and indeed the foreseeable future of city budgets, as systemic dismantling of the services and facilities that make Dawson Creek strong. We are hoping that moving forward, council will put a great priority on offering a vision of economic innovation and leadership that will give us hope as a community and goals we can collectively work towards. We need to see a corresponding investment in our future as part of the budgeting process, and we need to have a strong vision that encourages people to stay in the community. We are all in this together, and though we may not always agree, all of us care deeply about Dawson Creek and its people. So often people view city workers' relationship with the city as one-dimensional, but this could not be further from the truth. Our members are on the front lines of the services the city provides. We look into the eyes of the community members who rely on these services, and often they are the eyes of our friends and family because we also live here. And we are invested in having a strong community with strong services. Thank you for giving us the chance to speak tonight, and we hope you will take our concerns to heart. We love Dawson Creek, and we want to work together to make our future as bright as possible. Thank you.
So thank you, and I'm going to give each of council the opportunity to respond and give their views on your comments. And I'm going to begin by just giving you 2 or 3 things. And one, I want to absolutely acknowledge that the city employees are valuable assets. So there's, and we're all here. I guarantee every one of the people sitting up here and me, we're here for that exact reason, because Dawson Creek's our home. And it has been our home for a long, long time. And we agree with that. And quality of life is the #1 reason that we're all doing what we do. And so I'll touch very briefly on transit. And if we could ever find a model where we could get people to ride that those buses and reduce, we get all of the revenue. Anytime somebody jumps on that bus, we get the revenue for it, and we share the cost. The only thing we're cutting is the times when the transit is not being used. And that's the dilemma we've had. We're gonna keep it operating in the morning, we're gonna keep it operating during the day, and in the evening. We just can't find a way to get people who will use it and pay to use it during the rest of those times. And this is not an easy decision, and it wasn't an easy decision, but that's clearly the direction council has taken. And I just want to close very quickly on the Encana Event Center. So we have a contract with them to operate it. We have absolutely a $6 million budget. It's a $1.5 million back that we subsidize the operation of that facility. It does provide economic benefit to our community. We can demonstrate that through the event sport tourism model that we're going down the road on. as well as non-church. And I'll give you a really good example of that. So when we did the World Junior A Challenge recently with the Canada Event Center, I talked to some of our local business owners, and without question, 15 to 20% of their operations increased their volume. 15 to 20% their business were up as a result of us hosting those events. So that creates economic spin into our community. It creates jobs, it creates opportunities, and that was what the Canada Event Center was built on that premise, to be able to create events and major events within the community and the region for us to be able to leverage. And we are doing everything we can to leverage that facility to create opportunities that build our businesses. We're having a new hotel built right now under construction on Alaska Avenue, the State Bridge Hotel. Each one of those hotels, those major hotels, when they're built, are going to add $150,000 to $200,000 in revenue to the city for property taxation. That is a huge opportunity for our communities to help bridge the gap that we need and taking the burden off of residents, continue to be able to provide opportunities and services to create jobs and create services for our community. I'm going to stop there because I want to let council answer, but thank you guys for asking. So, Robin, before we do, I want to get council to go through and then they can respond to this or in the questions and any comments they may have. So, Jeremy, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you both for your thoughts and all the QP staff and this committee. We do appreciate you and we appreciate what these have been. A challenging couple of years with respect to the budget, certainly as one of the new councillors, you'll be run for public office to close the library Sundays and stuff like that. So I concur it's been challenging. A couple things with respect to Spectre Venue Management. They do provide an annual general report with financial statements where the expenses are itemized.
Is that available to the general public? Because I've never seen
It's
one.
on the website, I believe, and they do present it annually, usually in the second quarter, or at least they better, because I used to spend hours on that thing. With respect to the parking lot, I completely agree that having a piece of infrastructure like that with a life cycle of 10 years is unacceptable. I'm not privy to all the details which went into it ending up like that, or having said that, it is an asset we own that we have a responsibility to maintain. That I believe was contingent upon, as you said, a grant from the federal government, which hasn't been approved yet. So that has been scuttled for the year, and the parking lot will remain as is. At some point, though, we are going to have to. I mean, it's ours. Regardless of the condition, we need to make sure it functions and it's safe and people can actually use it what it's intended for. But yes, great, tremendously disappointing. I remember when I worked there, we had a fire truck pull, and you could actually see a fire truck sink into the parking lot as people were trying to pull it. So that was a fun conversation to have. And just with respect to the buses, yeah, once again, not what I signed up to do, but when you look at the statistics about the usage, it's very hard to justify continuing the existing subsidy, given that it is roughly twice of what our peer groups throughout the province are subsidized per capita. And I know, what was it, this isn't, I think, the city's first kick at the can with respect to addressing ridership. I think it was in 07, 08, they beefed up the existing transit service based on a recommendation from BC Transit that kind of an if you build, they would come approach in order to address falling ridership. That didn't work. Ridership has continued to decline approximately 1% a year since then, and costs continue to go up. So, I mean, we all like the idea of public transit. Unfortunately, that hasn't translated into increased usage.
Corey, sorry.
I think Corey had a reply to.
No, I just had another question. I mean, that rationalization of saying that no one's using it, so it's not worth it, I feel is a little spurious. It's not. Public transportation doesn't just affect, most of the people here drove. Nobody took the bus here, right? So when we look at that and we say, well, no one's using it, let's get rid of it. I think that's the wrong approach to this. It should be, what can we do to get people to use it? Not only will it make Dawson Creek greener, stays on the infrastructure. We're talking about building new roads or repairing roads. If I have everybody in this room driving their vehicle on those roads or one bus, how long are the roads gonna last? Probably better with one bus. So what I would not argue, but just suggest is that perhaps this is something that we all need as a community to brainstorm more about. Perhaps there could be incentives to people that I'm not gonna drive my car today, I'll have a ticket or whatever it is that would be a deal. Or the college, trying to do something in partnership with the majority. Students, you look at the school division here, yes, they have buses, but they don't do the same thing that they used to do with buses before. My children in particular will have to take the city bus home after school because previously they were able to hop on that yellow bus and get to the house. You can't do that, right? I have a great job. I love my bosses, and it's a perfect place to work. There's lots of people out there that don't, and these people are reliant on that transportation. Removing that, you're removing their way of making money. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You cut that off, you got people that can't get groceries unless they go in cab. I won't drive. There you go. See, so I just want us to be thinking about that. I'm not trying to blame anybody. These are ideas that perhaps we can put in there rather than just cut it. Shayla?
Sure, I was gonna actually touch on transportation, and so throughout the discussion, and as hard as it was for me, because I do work with some of our most vulnerable people in our community that do use that system, and I've purposely, we can't, Paul's talking, is that better? Is that better? Paul's talking so much you can't hear me. So what I was saying was that was a hard conversation for me because I do work with people in the community that are the most vulnerable that use that system. And part of my decision in moving forward with what we looked at was not cutting the service, but changing the service provided so that it was still available. Our buses are full for students that are going to school, and it is used by those in the community that are using it to get to work, and they'll still be able to get home on the work days. Saturday is going to be an adjustment, and I know as a vocational coach with Bear, I've had to adjust my meetings with my clients so that they can use the transit that we help provide for them. So in the future, I think we can look at it, if ridership increases, we can make those changes again, but I know that BC Transit did come to council. They have some ideas that will have some incentives that will make it more affordable for single parents or those that are most vulnerable. So I think we have to play that process out. And unfortunately, you know, to get to where we want to be, to provide all of the services in the community, being a community that has the second lowest ridership in the province, next to Port St. John, it was a hard decision. But what council did make the decision to do was we're not going to get rid of the service. We just have to change how it's provided right now so that we can get to where we need to be sustainable as a community. So I just wanted to touch on that. And then with the event center, with council changing how we're looking at tourism and how we're utilizing the facilities that we have, I think there's going to be a positive ripple effect to that, and we're going to see that spin off, as Dale has mentioned, to local businesses. So every dollar that's spent local stays local. And so how do we keep that coming around back and back to our communities, to our businesses, to our workers? And part of that for tourism, and whether it be at the event center or events at the pool or events at the soccer fields, whatever it may be, how do we put a face on that and get people to stay that extra day or two? We have a very short tourist season, so we have to look outside that box. So I think you're going to see ripple effects. We've made tough decisions, and I'm the first one to say, as you know, last budget round, if I agree or not, these are tough decisions, but I think together we're going to get through it. And when the time comes and when things are looking a little better, we can look at readjusting those services, and transit will be one of them that I definitely would bring forward if in light we have greater ridership.
Wait, sorry, wait. So Robin first and then wait.
Yeah.
You got the mic, go ahead, Robin.
Okay. Yeah, I'm one of those people in town, and no way, I don't drive. I can't do it legally anyway, but this year I'm also more medically incapable of walking great distances. And when it comes to Canada, I would like to see this building be more utilized than the Canada Center. Because if I choose to go to the Canada Center, it's a $40 return cab fare. When you're not working, $40 is a lot of money. That's why, and that is just, that's one thing I could really. And obviously, yeah, I could adjust my finances accordingly, so if I want to go out to Canada or something, that I make sure I have the money. But it also makes more sense, especially when I think we're probably still paying for this, reconstruction of this building, that they actually use this building. Anyway, that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Wayne was at the back here.
I want to begin by saying I empathize with the job you have. I've been there, and it's not an easy decision to make. However, I like to call myself the advocate for the forgotten 20% of our population. And that 20% are the folks that were born and raised here, paid their taxes here, worked hard, supported this city, and they're now at a point in their lives where they're living on very fixed incomes. And through no fault of their own, not everybody had a job that had a good pension that came with it. So they're trying to live on $1,200 a month, $1,500 a month. And some of those still own a home. And those homes are in very bad repair. They need work, but they got the money to do it. So they have a choice to make. Do we sell the house for whatever we can get for it? But when they do that, where the hell are they going to live? There is no housing. If you want to try and get into one of the, like Rotary Manor or those apartments that are by there, I'm understanding there's 2 or 3 year waiting list. So when you raise those people's taxes 2 and 3%, and their water and sewerage by 2 and 3%, I can tell you, I won't name names, but I can tell you some folks out there that are living on $30 a week for groceries. That's their grocery bill. That's all they have left. They don't have a car. They're at a stage where maybe they either can't afford the car or they've given up their driver's license. But they still live in this city, and they built this city long before we came here. So I understand you need to be progressive in how you pay the bills. I understand that. But please don't forget that forgotten 20% who can no longer take any more hits, but still deserve to live in this city and take advantage of what programs they can. So just please keep that in mind at all times. They're out there, and as they disappear, there's more of us get to those ages that are going to fill those spots. So I just want to speak for them. We're constantly looking for ways to bring more dollars in, and we're doing that here. I sit on the board here now, and we're looking at ways to increase revenues here. But I take a look at some of the infrastructure that we have here in the city, and I'm going to use the fire training center that we built out by the airport. I don't know what that costs, doesn't matter, it's there. And I don't even think the siding was on it before St. John decided they needed to build one. Why aren't we trying to form partnerships with our other communities where we can rent them? These places we have, instead of them building another one, because when they say, well, the feds give us the money or the province give us the money, that's still coming out of our damn ass pocket. It's taxes. So I think we can take a better look at I mean, we're talking very few dollars, I understand that, 10,000 here, 5,000 there, but it adds up because it isn't coming out of my pocket or yours. So that's all I got to say, it's just suggestions, and we'll go with that, thank you.
So thank you, Wayne, and certainly I think that's exactly the dilemma that your council are in when you're trying to decide where you get the money from and what services you're going to continue to provide. I want to use an example because you talked about that sub-regional requisition stuff for us in terms of the services we're all trying to provide and balancing that with limited income and limited revenue. But the fire training center, I want to speak exactly to that. So we get funding from the RD. We've reached out to them. We said to the Charlie Lake, the ARIS, the Area D, the Area E, the Area B, Pooskoopie, Chetwynd, Tumble Ridge, Hudson Oak, every one of them that we built this fire training center, and it's an amazing facility that gives them the opportunity. And every one of them are either using it or are contributing to the revenue, except Fort St. John. And Fort St. John decided to build their own, and we didn't know they were planning to build one. And had we known that 3 or 4 years ago that they were planning to build one, but that didn't pop up until we built.
We weren't planning. They did it because we got it. That's fine.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Charlie.
Share it, it's all calls. That's as far as it goes.
Oh, yeah, well, I'd like to respond to, first of all, I must say that I agree with a lot of the statements that have been made and was appreciated very much the sensitivity about the precarious position the city finds itself in because of its use of the fair share money for operating. From friends in senior government positions and provincial politicians a few years ago, I became aware of the practice of the city to use the fair share money was putting the whole fair share present from the province, if I can use that expression, in jeopardy. And it was getting difficult to defend fair share when the city of Dawson Creek was using it for operating purposes. I think strong advocacy at the provincial level has sustained it. But my concern has been alleviated to a great degree by this council's desire to deal with this challenge. So I appreciated the comments that were made earlier this evening, because it is going to be difficult. At the election time, I stressed that it's going to be a very difficult term. Cuts are not made because we want to make cuts, they have to be made. You don't recoup $8 million or so without cutting services in some way. But we have to be careful that we don't decimate the city. This has to continue to be a good place to bring families up, a place to retire to, etc., etc. We're blessed with some wonderful facilities. The multiplex has been talked about, and yes, it is a real problem. I facilitated years ago all the meetings that occurred in consultation with, I think, 20 plus stakeholder groups that led to the multiplex being decided upon as a capital project for this community. It's here. There's no point going into history. We do have some challenges. If you look at the list that the mayor read you, the subsidies to different recreational services, if you add all of those up, plus the debt retirement, plus the needed maintenance, you're looking at over $5 million a year for the multiplex in its entirety. That's Nakota, that's the Ken Bollock Center, that's the actual event center. I don't think that's sustainable over time. I think this community will come a time when we will have to have some very serious review of where do we go. And can you imagine the cost of replacing the multiplex? It's beyond, I don't know what it would be. It's 60-something million now. Imagine what it would be when it comes at the time for the replacement. Yes, we have a great swimming pool. I do use the swimming pool, and we have a great staff there. But boy, I'm horrified at the subsidy required. The old pool used to require a subsidy between 300,000 and 400,000. This current wonderful swimming pool is about 1.3 million. So you wonder why we're under some great pressure fiscally. So I want to respond to some specific things. Wayne Beezer knows, I believe, that I agree with him 110% about the issue he raised concerning rental suites, etc. They're a business, and I'm hopeful that this council will find time with its staff to deal with that. It's on the list for sure. I always remember, Wayne, a book I read, I forget the author, and I may get the title slightly wrong, but it was Pay the Rent or Feed the Children. It's a book, maybe Maud Barlow, I think, wrote it. Yes, a lot of people in this community are struggling. I know from first-hand experience, working with some seniors, about their plight, or as in my role on the board of directors for the Dawson Creek Society for Community Living. The society is the major provider of homes for seniors, and our desire to try to expand our capacity to provide more places. But that project is also is on the front burners with this city. We have land, Grandview School, former Grandview School, that I believe the mayor has charged Council Edstrom and Council Kent with that particular work, how we can leverage that land to maybe get some low cost housing, some more facilities for seniors, for shelter for people who need shelter, something that's sort of a mixed place, but it's located by a park, it's a nice location, so that is definitely on the agenda. But I know, I've always tried to say, well, yeah, it's okay for people to say, well, we don't mind more taxes, but they're all, they're very well-paid jobs. I haven't seen anybody at the other end who doesn't say that. Going to the busing issue, I think the answers were perfectly adequate, and I know they were factually corrected. I talked to many of the seniors, why don't you use the bus system? And the answer, because I know that BC Transit had as one of their focuses a couple of years ago, try to increase the ridership, and seniors were a target group. The seniors who I asked, and there are quite a few of them, said we're scared of walking on ice. It's cold, many months. We need door-to-door service. We have a step-up and ride operation here, which is another gem in our community. I've often thought, is there a way we can expand that? Is there a way we can maybe move some of the funding that was used to primarily for empty buses driving all over the community? Because I agree with you, the to representatives of the union very much that we do need to enable our vulnerable and those less fortunate perhaps and just the regular working people to get to work or to join this community. But transit wasn't doing it. And I think we need to not get stuck into a paradigm that transit is the way. Let's see if there's other paradigms about how we can support people getting to the places they need to get to. And I use one other common example for seniors getting to medical appointments. They might be able to get the bus to their doctors, but then they need to get to the pharmacist, or then they need to get to the hospital. Well, come on, they need service to do that. The buses do not do that. But good questions, and I appreciate, as I said earlier, what's been said here. Thank you.
So just a quick point there. No one's saying that the buses are a panacea and they're gonna solve all the problems. What we're saying is I think that it's part of the mindset of this city and Fort St. John. I drive my truck to work every day. Why? I don't have to drive my truck. If there was a bus that came by my house and took me up my yards, screw my truck. Why would I spend that money on fuel when I could drop the, $1.75, $2 in there? Way cheaper for me, right? But that's not, it is what it is, right? Speaking to the seniors one, I wouldn't mind seeing like an app that maybe the city could develop, because we have some money. Develop that app because I can make an appointment at the doctor's tomorrow online, fit my time in, whatever it is. Something maybe like an Uber, but not Uber, Scoober, something like that. But I mean, it speaks to Wayne's point here too. These people need some extra special care. They did build this community, and maybe that's something council could talk about doing. If it's as simple as scheduling appointments and having things done like that, step up and ride. Have an app for it. They could fill it out, and away you go. Right? Get them where they're going to go. The other point I wanted to just kind of clarify here and ask a question about is I noticed on the first couple of slides there that Dale had up, looking at the payment, the changes to the interest on payments, late payments for utilities and stuff like that. That's all fine and dandy, but are you guys not concerned that this will be just another tax on people that can't afford to pay on time? If I have to pay more money because I can't afford to pay the thing, whatever the thing is, now I'm getting hammered again because I'm late with that. Is that not just putting that particular person deeper into the hole?
All right, lots of questions. I'm just gonna take a shot at a couple.
Can I just answer what he said so you can throw this in the mix? If you're going to charge somebody for being late, why don't you put an incentive where if I want to pay my utilities up front for the year,
Give me a deal.
give me a deal. I'll come and pay you the $150 or whatever the heck it is. And I write you a check, and at the end of the year, because I use more water, I owe you $20. Well, then hit me for that when I pay you again the next year. So then you'd have money up front and in the bank. Two-way street.
All right, maybe a couple things I was gonna speak to. That one first, Wayne. I think right now I'll speak to taxes. If you prepay your taxes, whether it be monthly or in a lump sum, we do give you an incentive. We pay, and I'm gonna guess 1.9% interest right about now. So that happens now. Now, I don't think on the utility side that is done. What happens on that penalty? It's bringing us in line with what every other utility does. There's a carrying cost to the city. So if I don't pay my water bill for 11 and a half months and I walk in and pay it all with no penalty, thank you to all the other taxpayers who have helped carry me for that 11 and a half months. That's the equity portion we're trying. Nobody likes to pay a penalty, but that one I'm okay with, as much as nobody wants to. I think we have to live with that. I'm going to talk to a couple of different things I've heard. The buses, where you said, look, if the bus was there, you drop your $1.75 or $2 in and jump on it. That's good. The problem we were having is although you put in your $1.75 or $2, the taxpayer then put in $7 for every ride you took. Every rider that got on that bus was subsidized $7 a ride. Now, does that mean it's a bad service? No, it doesn't mean it's a bad service. It means it's not affordable for us at this point. If we were flush with money, we probably wouldn't be having many of the discussion where we hopefully would be having some, because prudent fiscal responsibility is what you're elected to do, but that's the challenge we run into. And so I ride from Crescent Park where I live, I jump on the bus, pay my $2, go downtown, get on the bus, come back home. The taxpayers of the city of Dawson Creek have just paid $14 for it on my behalf. We're trying to find that balance. That's why instead of getting rid of the service, we're saying, how do we streamline it to an affordability for the city taxpayers? Because it's not our money, it's your money, and it's all of our money. And meet the needs. So can we do it by making sure the school kids can get to and from the schools? We're gonna try, I think we're gonna accomplish that. Somebody said, it might have been you, used to get on the yellow school buses and go back and forth many years ago, but the school board got out of that. Maybe it was an affordability issue for it. We still pay taxes to the school board, but the other one, Wayne, and I'm jumping around a bit, you touched on our seniors and everybody here. I mean, you wish when you ran for council, I think it'd be fair to say that you could say yes to everything. It's a great feeling, right? When you are able to do that. I'll throw this out, if there are people though that are struggling, and this is a provincial program, and I'm not sure if you're aware, it's called the tax deferral. You can defer your taxes as a senior in our province now. So if I'm struggling financially and there's a burden on me and my tax bill is for the sake of $2,000 a year, I can defer that. So at the end of time, and I don't want to say till you that, but until you're ready to leave that residence, at which time then it can be recouped. So there is some, it may not be the panacea or the answer to affordability, but it gives those individuals and families that opportunity. So in case you didn't know, that's a provincial program. I think it's fair to say the ideas that we have as council, we don't have all the ideas. You elect us to go and do the best we can. We've got to be able to hear from you. But we're cutting $7 million out of an operating budget. A $30 million operating budget. Very difficult to do. If you compare it to your home and say, geez, in all honesty, this is nobody's fault, but the reality is we've lived beyond our means for some time. That's just as simple as I could put it from what I see financially. Doesn't mean people were bad people doing this. We've got pretty used to pretty good things, and we have a wonderful city. Now we just want to make sure that we want to have that wonderful city for the long term. And I think you said, whether it's 7 years, I hope it's 70 or 80 or 100 or 300 years from now. But in order to get there, I don't think I certainly can't sit here and tell you that in order for us to move the amount of revenue, of fair share revenue that we have, or PRA revenue in our budget today, operating budget, that we're able to do that without affecting services going forward. We can't. The old thing of do more with less, we're going to do less with less. That's a tough reality to sit and tell you as an elected official, to look somebody in the eye and say, you know what, I think services are going to be felt. Now, how can we do it the best way? It's through these discussions we're having right here. The ideas you said, maybe we could get together. I think every councillor up here is open any day of the week to go for coffee with anybody, to sit down, have people come. But you bet. But it's an interesting job as an elected official, but as an elected official, you're no different than the person that lives beside you. I mean, we have lots of conversations, what will work, what won't, but we're going to go down a road of some tough decisions still. We've seen, I say this, the 1.3 million we took out of our operating budget last year, it's probably the easiest 1.3 million we'll find in that $7 million venture we're looking for. And that still leaves, I'll use the 15% of fair share revenue we're talking about leaving in operations, is not to fund services. That will fund the debt payment. And that debt is incurred because of capital. That's how you can say, hold it, it makes sense to leave that in the operations. We incur debt for capital projects. That's why we're going to sit at 15%. Maybe that number fluctuates a bit. That's a discussion we have with the community and with the council. But overall, the questions here tonight are great. The buses is a difficult one. We're trying to make sure that we can still, even with the changes we're putting forward, meet the needs of the majority of the needs. But as I said, I don't want to leave the room tonight with anybody thinking, I think we can do this without seeing any more service impacts, because I think there will be some. Now, what they are, hopefully we can collaborate and find out what's the best, probably isn't the word I'm looking for, but it's palatable that we could all live with.
I have a friend that suggested using smaller buses. Like the big diesel buses that are all, were, with all the,
So the issue with that is it's a partnership with Transit who provide the buses, and then we partner with them in the costs, and we get the revenue. So we don't get a choice in what type of buses are used, Robin, in the transit partnership.
I don't, but the routes are 200 miles a week, and I checked that out in one of the drivers too. And you know, that's an awful lot of diesel fuel for extended. If they had a smaller bus, they wouldn't be having to be spending 4 miles to get on one bus.
Can I jump in? One of the things that I agree that would serve us much better during the low usage, that the current buses, if you see them in the morning, the school kids, they're standing, only, they're packed. So we have to have 2 or 3 of those small buses for the early start to the day and for the end of the school day. So we wouldn't be any further ahead.
Does anybody know how many people actually ride the buses? Because if you're spending $700 grand a year to subsidize at $7 a ride, that means there's 100,000 people that ride the bus.
100,000 rides last year.
Really?
100,000 rides?
And that's not enough?
Wow.
If you break that down to 2 rides a day.
That's like 273 rides a day, every day all year. But that's not enough.
3 groups.
I just wanna, do you know the ridership?
We got 100,000
Or
rides.
are you just writing a check for 700 grand to the BC Transit?
So just so I can go back, for every rider that gets on there, your numbers are very close. I think it's 99,000.
Okay.
It's $7 a ride. So the issue isn't the total budget we've got on operating that system with what we put in, what transit puts in. For every ride, it's $7 from the taxpayer to offset the $1.75 or $2 or the student passer that you're doing. What we're saying, we can't afford that when we're trying to move $7 million out of operating. So then you start saying, okay, what can we do? That's one of the things, which is, can we accomplish a change that will meet the vast majority of the ridership and still save money, which is $300,000 I'll use.
Sure.
But if 100,000 sounds like a lot, because when I see that, I don't know, wow.
I was just checking the map.
It should be good. I should see more than I see on the buses, but it is full in the mornings, children after schools, both of those, but it's still, no matter what we look at it, slices to $7 a ride that the taxpayer puts in. That's our challenge on that.
Can I just add one other perspective? If you figure that you have a child who's going to school in the morning and using on the bus and coming back on the bus in the evening, and you multiply that by, let's say, 185 days, which is the normal school year, and you multiply that by $14 a day, each child, if I've got 3 children, they'll be subsidized to the tune of about $6,000. Incredible.
Just a question on, do we have to be with this company? This transit company in particular? Could the city have its own, I'm not pushing it, I don't wanna run nothing else, but could we not have our own transit? With whatever the heck size buses we want that we figure can handle. Let's take the entrepreneurial spirit maybe? I'm not sure, I don't know. I don't know if it's provincial, that we have to have these guys, or whatever, just curious.
So so we have, honestly, if I can, the issue is riders. And you get core, usage during those morning and evening, and then and we see them, they're running around empty for the rest of the day. And so that's the issue for us, and we have honestly massaged those routes, we put in different routes, added routes, changed routes, tried to manage them. We still are maintaining a 9% ridership, and that's the issue. So no matter what we've done with transit in trying to manage those routes, we just can't get people to ride them. And so the changes the council have directed is saying, we're gonna keep them in the morning, we're gonna keep them in the afternoon, but we can't continue to put $350,000 additional cost into it when people aren't riding them. And so if we put it on our own, we've talked to other groups, we've talked to Step Up and Ride, we've talked to the seniors, we've talked to other organizations about alternate models. So we're not just saying, here, it's easy, we're cutting them. We have done other work around it. The problem is we just can't find a model that gets those riders. If we have another 100,000 or 200,000 riders, that's pure revenue to us that would help offset the cost. We wouldn't be in this. It's just you can't get people to use the service.
Yeah, but the question I had was, is there not a way to make it so that it's not $7 subsidized? If we own our own buses, if we had our own drivers, would that not cost down? Or like city drivers, would that not cost? I'm just throwing questions out there, I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't know that we've ever done the analytics, or maybe you can answer that for us.
Sure.
Just first of all, let Duncan answer it, and then we'll get back to Duncan.
Good evening. Is that on?
Yeah.
Okay. So when council took a look at this transit system and asked us to do some research, a couple things came to light. And the first question, while we're talking about math, 100,000 users, $77,000 in revenue doesn't add up at $1.50 or $2 a ride. So of that 100,000 users, those are multiple buses. So they're taking the math from 3 buses. However, often it's only 1 fare. And so before that question comes up, that's the answer. We looked around, we talked to the school district, we talked to Step Up and Ride, and something that came to light when we met with Step Up and Ride is that our reduced service at $350,000 is approximately what their budget is, yet we're serving more customers and we're providing more service hours throughout the day. And so what we found was BC Transit and their subsidy of almost 50% is really the most efficient way to provide that service, because it's really a $700,000 service that we're going to be providing moving forward. However, we're only paying that $350,000 portion, and anticipating, we budgeted low, but we're anticipating that our revenue will be very similar to what it was before.
So that their transit are subsidizing on top of that 700 we're putting in.
Right.
So.
Okay.
So the taxpayers paying twice.
We already do.
So
I'm surprised it's only twice.
I have to stand up because I'm short and not very good here. I think that we have a system that does work. I am a senior, and if I needed to get downtown or anywhere and I hadn't my own transportation, I would not be wanting to take the city bus. I live on a street with no sidewalks, deep ditches, icy streets, and Step Up and Ride would be my solution for me. And I think that many seniors would rather get on a Step Up and Ride system and pay our share there if we could have a city solution with more Step Up and Ride buses to be able to handle that. I know they handle getting the children to school that can't get on the city buses, and I think that is a solution. It's just a matter of finding out how to make it work so that senior citizens can all have access to that. Even if we had to buy a pass for the year for that service.
You know what, I have a question. I live downtown. By the grace of God, I live downtown. If I was living way up by the Rotary Manor, there is no way in God's way here that I could even get down to the art gallery. And where by using the bus, even at $2 a ride, because the government doesn't like paying much money from anyone, including federal and provincial, pension. And, you know, I can understand, you know, it costs money that people drive buses. That's what they do for work. And so they have to make money. But at the same token, you know, like I've been on the city bus to go to elections, and there's only been one passenger on that bus, and that was me. And the guy actually did a whole route, which is about 20 miles each time it goes around in a circle. So, you know, that's a lot of ridership that isn't happening.
I just want to touch on housing and like, oh, my children say I'm loud, but no. We looked at so many different aspects, and it wasn't like we just said to staff what we did. They did that, they came back, we said, okay, go back, how we do this. So we really, really looked at it, and even in conversations with Step Up and Ride, it wasn't even feasible for them to look at. And it's not just about the buses and the rates and having the transportation. It's about maintaining bus stops and having them and their distance between each other. All of those things are costs that are part of the transportation system. So as much as it's not my favorite, I think in this case, we found a solution for the community to keep the service. Because one aspect was, what does it look like if we don't have the service at all? So I think when we look at the whole picture and the whole conversation that we've had, I think as a group, we've come up with something that's viable for the community and at this point in time is workable for the community. And, you know, Robin is always here and talks, and I hear a lot from Robin about accessibility within the community. So I do understand, and it was a hard decision, but I am telling you, having looked at every single option that was out there, this was the best solution for the community. So, you know, as frustrating as it is, and as much as it means people may have to reschedule their day, it's something in order to keep the system that we had to do. So I stand behind it. But the other thing I wanted to touch on was the housing. And we hear a lot about seniors housing, and we need it. We have a gap in seniors housing, but we do have homeless in our community. We do have people in transition. We do have people who are couch surfing. So when we look at housing, I know PRRD is doing some studies right now on looking at all of those gaps. And seniors are very important to our community, but so are those people who don't have a home at all and cannot afford an apartment in this community. And unfortunately, we don't control rents or availability. And so when we look at housing, I just want everyone to know we're looking at it in the full picture, because everybody deserves to have a home and everybody deserves to feel safe in our community. So as much as, yes, we have a housing gap for seniors, the most vulnerable people in this community, and do not think we don't have homeless, because we do. And so they need a place to live too. So when we look at housing, we're gonna look at everybody that needs a place to call home. So I just wanna put that out there, because as much as I support seniors housing when I do, I want everyone in the community to know that there are people out there who are much more vulnerable. And when I see families whose only choice is gonna be to sleep in their car, that bothers me. They deserve to have a home too. So when we look at the housing gap, we're going to look at the entire housing gap.
So we're at 9 o'clock, or basically 9 o'clock, and we hope that we've answered the questions that you came with tonight to be able to give you some information on this budget. So we've been working on it since October, November, I think, and it's the important work, honestly, that we realize how important it is. And hopefully we've been able to address some of that tonight. It's ongoing. It gets finally adopted, I think, the first week in May. And by legislation, we have to have it approved by then. So these folks are available anytime, and I think I speak for each and every one of them. If you have questions or you have comments, I honestly don't hesitate to contact us, because that's exactly what we want. We want to hear from folks, because we need that feedback from folks to help us make those the best decisions we can for our community. So I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and giving us an opportunity to give you a little insight into our budget, and we appreciate you taking the time to do that. So thank you.